Tomorrow night's game is on ESPN 2 at 8 Eastern. You can watch Kirk Morris and Don Davenport. And our next guest, who is the play-by-play, he is Mike Couzens on BYU Sports Nation. Mike, thanks for taking the time, man.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
The story going into the game is kind of the weather. What are you hearing about this, and what are you expecting?
A wide variety of things that are possible. Basically, it could be somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 inches of rain, but that's like a very small percentage. Somewhere between 1 to 2 inches of rain. And from what I read this morning from the National Weather Service, as I really geeked out and got into their nitty gritty, is it might come down really heavy and then dissipate. So as Brent Brennan, the Arizona head coach, said yesterday, we can play through anything. Like the U.S. Postal Service will deliver in sleet, snow, rain, whatever the case might be. No lightning, and everybody's happy.
BYU's expecting a bunch of rain. They're preparing for it, too. Do you think that could mean a heavy run game if it is a downpour?
Yeah, I think definitely if one of the teams takes an early lead, they'll lean into that more. But both of these teams like to throw the ball too. I think it certainly favors BYU with the way that LJ Martin is such a downhill runner that's built into their attack, that they're able to, for lack of a better term, to ground and pound things away. So I certainly don't know that it favors either team, that they're going to go away from what they do. But in the event of a team taking a lead, I've got to think that they lean more heavily into that for sure.
And so far, neither team is kind of top even 90 in strength of schedule, but have fared pretty well, 4-1 and 5-0 respectively. Desert Swarm is back, question mark. This Arizona defense looks pretty good, haven't allowed a passing touchdown. Chase Roberts told me earlier this week, hey, that's going to end. We're going to score a passing touchdown against Arizona. What do you expect in that matchup of a very good secondary against the BYU passing offense, which really broke out against West Virginia?
I definitely feel like this is the game that the levee breaks, and not like full on the dam falls down and all the water comes through, but at least there's going to be some cracks where BYU does find the end zone through the air. With the way that Bachmeier passed last week, and we can go on and on about his poise and how good he started the year, but to throw for 351 yards and come close to a couple of BYU records, that's been phenomenal. Now, Arizona's defense has certainly helped them a long way, that they've gone 16 of 20 quarters where they have not allowed the opponent to score. 3 of the first 5 teams they faced have not hit 100 passing yards through the air. So that's been really impressive, that the way that they've started this year. But I think that with the combination of guys that Bachmeier has to throw to, maybe he'll hit his brother for the first brother-to-brother touchdown, Carson Ryan too. I think it's just too good of an attack to be able to not find the end zone through the air this week.
We're expecting that brother-to-brother touchdown at some point. It's only happened, we think, one other time in BYU history. That would be Baylor and Gunnar Romney a couple of years ago at BYU. So perhaps this is the game. We'll see. We're talking to Mike Couzens of ESPN, who will call the game on ESPN 2 tomorrow night at 8 Eastern time. Bear Bachmeier's been spectacular. We thought he would be good as a freshman, but you kind of get great freshmen on a different scale. But he's just been straight up good. Turned it over a little bit last week. But what are your impressions of what he's done through 5 games?
Well, the thing that has been most impressive to me, I think, is just the way that he became the starter on such a short timeline of coming over from Stanford, having not a ton of time to learn the playbook, and then beating out 2 guys who had more experience than he did. And I was thinking about this in preparation for our conversation today. Is one of the things that I really admire about Coach Sitake relative to other college football coaches is just how even he is all the time. It's about, we're going to go out week by week. We're going to do our work. We're going to, take it with an even approach. And I feel like Bear Bachmeier very much embodies what his head coach has. And it's such an even and calm approach. And then I heard on one of the interviews that you guys did with him after practice in recent days was talking about how he'll go out and crack a joke in the huddle. And like, that's something that you don't do unless you're really comfortable getting out there. Because if you're not comfortable with who you are and what you're doing and who you're leading, you're just going to really try and stick to the facts. And he hasn't done that. And the fact that I think the BYU football account put this out, that him and Robert Griffin in 2008 are the only Big 12 quarterbacks in their first 5 career games to throw for at least 5 touchdowns, rush for at least 5 touchdowns. Those are really impressive numbers. And you've got to think that this is not even the full arsenal that he's been able to work with so far in terms of the playbook. So there's highly good odds that it gets better from here. What has been interesting to me is the conversation around the strength of schedule, because as we know, it has not been tremendously difficult for BYU yet. The easiest strength of schedule in the Big 12 now becomes the hardest schedule in the Big 12. And I know A-Rod talked about this week that this might be the toughest 6-game stretch in BYU history. So my mind got thinking, let me ask our research department about that. They came back to me with these next 6 games are the 39th most difficult 6-game stretch for any team in college football this year, an average team and their expected winning percentage among these next 6 games. So it's not to say that it's not difficult relative to BYU because of how good the Big 12 is this year. But so I guess it's just to say other teams have more difficult 6-game stretches.
Yeah, that's interesting because right now all of them are 4-1 or 5-0. We're expecting many of those to be ranked teams when BYU gets there. So that's interesting that it's 39th. But BYU as a Power 4 team now has never had this kind of schedule, let alone good quality there. As we talked to Mike Couzens of ESPN. Turnovers will be an interesting conversation in this one. Arizona very good at them. 11 takeaways, 7 picks. BYU kind of kept West Virginia in the game with 3 giveaways last week. What role do you feel giveaways and takeaways will play in this one?
Well, Arizona has really turned up the pressure under Danny Gonzalez, their new defensive coordinator, who was on staff last year coaching the linebackers. But the 7 interceptions that they have this year is 1 fewer than they had in 12 games all of last year. And I thought that was something that, we're going to meet with both coaching staffs later on today. And I do want to ask Kalani Sitake about that, of how much he emphasized this week finishing the game, because both teams played inferior opponents last week. West Virginia's got everybody on their roster who's in a crucial situation hurt this year. Oklahoma State has had the wheels fall off with Mike Gundy getting fired. And so those are the types of games where I think you have to prove to yourself we're able to finish these games and not make silly mistakes where we're going to hurt ourselves, because those are the moments in preparation for later on in the season in a game like today where you're 5-0 versus 4-1 and teams that feel like they have a shot for the Big 12 championship game, and certainly BYU does, that you can't make those mistakes because they may not hurt you against the team that's going to finish the season with 4 wins, but they will hurt you, especially if you get into a situation like last year where you have 4 teams that end up tied for first, and it's the 3rd or 4th tiebreaker that determines who plays in the Big 12 title game.
Yeah, it really feels like a swing game given how tough the rest of the season is for BYU. By the way, it's the 50th birthday today for one Kalani Sitake, so I'm wondering what you're going to get him for his birthday.
Well, we're meeting with them at 5 o'clock here Mountain Time. So I've got some time, maybe go out, get some cake at the grocery store. This is interesting. I'm curious how many college football games have ever had this matchup where his middle name, Fifita, is the last name of the opposing team's quarterback.
Good one.
I wonder how many times that has happened in college football history.
That's a really good one. And early in his career, he would wear that on the back of his jersey, and then he went Sitake by the end. But yeah, Kalani Fifita Sitake is how he was known as a young player. He was a great fullback. He had good hands as well. He was awesome. Mike, we appreciate the time. Have a great call on ESPN2 tomorrow night. And hopefully it is indeed at 8 Eastern time.
We can only keep our fingers crossed, and we'll have our Red Bull ready to go.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.